Right, so we've got a weather monitoring station, 4 bands, so it's a banding problem, which you might get with student grades and things as well. Right, the weather station records the temperature every day as an integer. At the end of the year, the temperatures are stored in an array called temperatures. Okay? Important that we use the names they're giving us. So temperatures, even though it's a stupidly long name, we're going to have to use it. Right, so it says write a program in pseudocode that reads through this array and produces an output which shows the total number of days within each band. And there's an example of the output. Okay. Ensure your code is efficient. I don't actually know what they mean by that, but there you go. I think they mean not doing things 15 times or something like that. Right. There's a few things that we need to be careful of. This is what we call a running total problem. Whenever you've got a running total problem, we're going to have to reset the totals at the start, initialize. So your first thing should have been to write something like this for each of those bands. Okay, so if you're doing it in pseudocode, so you can do it like this, and it's JavaScript, you can do that anyway. You can actually do it a different way, but I'm not going to do that because it'll be confusing to you. Right, so that's my gimme. If I'm ever doing a running total problem, reset the totals. Otherwise, you don't know what's in those values. Okay? Right, then we've got to obviously process every element of this array. Now, some of you started putting like 366, 365. Don't ever do that. Even if they say there are 10 items in the array, if you're processing an array, always use length. Always use length. And then you can't screw it up. Alright, so we know we need to do every single one. So I'm going to do a for loop. I'm going to do it in JavaScript notation. So I'm going to start a note, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to keep going while P is left than temperatures. I wouldn't have called it temperatures either. I would have given it a plural. Temperatures.length and P++. So I just want to step through each and every single one. Right, so because it's a grouping thing, and I think this is why they said do it efficient, what I should do is I should start at one end and work up or down. Doesn't matter which way you go. You can start with D and work to A, or A and work to D. Right, so all we've got to do to work out what band it is, there are hundreds of ways of doing these sort of tasks, but I'll just do it the simplistic way. Right, I'm going to check for band A. I'm going to go up the temperatures. So 10 or below. So if my temperature, so I'm just going to do an if, and it will be temperatures, if I scroll up a little bit, temperatures P. If that is less than or equal to 10, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one to the A band. So I'm just going to say band A plus plus. Right, if it isn't that, I need to then check, and I need to do it in order. So the next one should be band B, which I'll have to scroll back up, 11 to 20. So I'm going to say else if, and I've got to put the same thing again. So if temperature's P. Now this time, if it was 10 or less, then it's band A. So I don't actually need, doing it this way, I don't need to put the other check in. I could, if I wanted to, say, if it's between this and this, and do an and put 2 conditions. But I don't have to do that if I just do it in order. So I want, automatically, if it isn't in A, it's going to be at least 11, but I want to include 20. Okay? Right, so less than or equal to 20. Now, as you pointed out, you put 21 less than. Yeah? Did you put less than 21?
I did it the other way around, so I did less than 20, but going from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, you went D downwards. Right.
That's what I did.
They'll expect you to do that. To use the number from the range and put a condition in. That is equivalent to putting that. That's the same. That's the same logical. They said they were integers, didn't they? So there isn't going to be any in-between bit. Alright? But what I'm suggesting, you can do whatever you want, but what I'm suggesting you do is if you use the numbers that are in the range and write it as a range thing, then you're more likely to not get an examiner who will get paid about £3 per paper from OCR. And everyone reckons it takes about 20 minutes, so they're on like £10 an hour, or £9 an hour to mark these papers. They ain't going to do the world's greatest job. Okay, just got to be aware of that, the time pressure. They've got to mark them in 3 weeks, about 400 papers. So you've got to be careful and you've got to like help yourself. Right, okay, so I'm just going to stick to the bands. So if it's less than or equal to 20, then I'm going to do my band B increment. You can do these so you can write them in data-driven way, so you can just put some data in an array for your bands and write a little loop that's even shorter than this. I might do that with you at some point. Right, okay, so if it wasn't that, it must be 21 or bigger. We just need to make sure if it's less than or equal to 30. So I'm going to do another else. So else if, write the same thing. They were quite mean with the marks on this. They lumped B and C together. So you have to get B and C right in order to get 1 mark. Bit of a daft question, really. It didn't need to be this long-winded. So if it's less than or equal to 30, it must be bigger than the 20 that we had for the other 2 tests. Right, and then the last one's quite nice. All I've got to do is if it's not less than 10, not less than 20, not less than 30, it must be band D. So I can just put an else. Don't need to do a test. Mark the end of my loop, however you've done that. Put some more semicolons on, so I'm just strict. Right, so that's the majority of the question, but the last bit was to output. And they gave it as an example. If they give you an example of some output, they want you to copy the output. Alright, so we've got to do an equivalent to band A, colon, and then the number. So, as simple as just go in console.log band A colon plus and then the band A variable, and then doing that 4 times. They should have made it 3 and then it wouldn't have been as much to write. I don't know what happens if you make one mistake on one of these. Whether they go, oh, you can't have the marks for that then. Don't know. Don't know how mean they are with things like that. At least you can't copy paste when you're doing it like this. By hand. And make daft mistakes. What's important to get over on that is that not all the programming questions are monumentally hard. Okay, they vary in complexity. That one, that's a nice fair question. There's lots of elements to testing that you understand how to access arrays. They're testing that you understand how to nest ifs when you've got a series of comparisons that you need to make. So, reasonably fair question. They're checking that you realise running totals need to be initialised. So, even if you couldn't have done any of the question, If it's a running total problem, initialize totals. You'll get a mark. 1 mark can be the grade boundary difference. Okay.